This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Back for Chapter 37, What Might Be, and our symbol is the Portal Stone.
Which might be the most appropriate chapter header that we get in this book, because this chapter is all about the Portal Stones.
The lines of if.
I want to stop a moment before we get into this chapter.
And talk about how excited we are about it?
Yeah.
How excited everybody is?
I think this chapter is where Wheel of Time finds its voice.
Yeah.
In some ways, I feel like it's what makes the series unique and really creates this style of writing that's really skillful and makes you wonder and doesn't give you all the answers. And I really like it. And I think it's one of the best bits of writing in the book until we get to the Aiel Terangriel.
I'm nodding some more. It's such a bummer that we only see this from Rand's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to read like a lot of this.
Totally fair.
Like the whole page where he was a soldier, he was a shepherd. That page.
I fall into this and I think about it a lot. This is one of those chapters that I think I've thought about more than any other individual chapter. It affected me a lot in my personal growth growing up, thinking about what if and what could be. And
it is really cool to learn more about how reincarnation works and how Rand's life isn't set in stone, even though he does have this Ta'veren nature. It's not necessarily every time, like sometimes Moraine comes to the village, sometimes she does not. Sometimes other Aes Sedai come, sometimes they're Red Aja. All the ifs, all these things that have to go right.
Yeah, he's walking down a very narrow path, and I think this shows how any deviation off of it, and I win again, Lewis Theron. Which is something else I want to talk about.
Sure.
Because I also think that's just a masterful little bit of information. And part of me wants, at some point, Rand to be like dying and to hear like, I win again, Lewis Theron. Of course, part of me was always waiting for the like 3 books in, Rand dies, and he comes back, and then they're like, oh yeah, you were in the Portal Stone the whole time.
Alar led them away from the Waygate at a dignified pace, though Juin seemed more than anxious to leave the Waygate behind. Mat, at least, looked ahead eagerly, and Hurin seemed confident, while Loyal appeared concerned more that Alar might change her mind about his going than about anything else. Rand did not hurry, as he pulled Red along by the reins. He did not think Varen meant to use the stone herself. The gray stone column stood upright near a beach, almost 100 feet tall and 4 paces thick. Rand would have thought it a big tree before he saw the great trees. There was no warning coping here, only a few wildflowers pushing through the leafy mulch of the forest floor. The portal stone itself was weathered, but the symbols covering it were still clear enough to make out.
This is just a convenient portal stone right near the steading. The tree sort of gives it an idea of just how old it is, that you have this giant beech tree next to it.
Yeah, but it's even much older than that.
Amazing that it's in as good a shape that it is, actually.
Well, and it wasn't as good.
Sure.
We stood it upright, Alar said, when we found it many years ago, but we did not move it. It seemed to resist being moved. She went right up to it and laid a big hand on the stone. I have always thought of it as a symbol of what has been lost, what has been forgotten. In the age of legends, it could be studied and somewhat understood. To us, it is only a stone. More than that, I hope, Varen says.
What do you make of the fact that it resists moving?
It's anchored there somehow. It's like a point in the universe that cannot be moved or destroyed. Or, I mean, I guess age can eventually destroy it. Because we see some of them that are just a part of a portal stone. Like the first one that Rand comes across is just like a stump on the ground, right? And this one was broken and it was laying down.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be repaired, but it can't be moved somewhere else.
I imagine they're just somehow fixed to that point in space. I was going to say space and time, but they move forward with time. But basically that you're able to because they address a specific location, they sort of always want to move back to that location.
I think of it kind of like if you have many layers of fabric all stacked on top of each other, and then you put a pin through all of them. And that pin is there in all of the worlds. You can't move part of the pin on one of the pieces of fabric. You can't
That's
really.
a great analogy.
They're all connected there.
There's one giant stone going through all the different worlds.
Unless you were to remove the pin and put it somewhere else. You can't just, if that makes sense, adjust a piece of the pin that's on one of the layers of fabric. It's all one.
And it's like if you're trying to move just one little piece, you're like, why isn't this moving? It's like, because you're trying to move the pin through all the different layers. Yeah, exactly.
The next thing I have is Ingtar threatening again or saying essentially again that he can make Barthanas talk. Like, I can go to Kyrian and I can make sure that we're going to the right place.
I wonder if he's thinking about using, like, Dark Friend torturing techniques.
I don't know. He might. I figure he's seen enough brutal stuff just in the life of a soldier in the Borderlands that he could figure something out. Does he need Dark Friend help?
I noticed the Ogier offer help because, the Tarmangaiden will not pass us by. That's something that is a bit of a debate, I think, among the Ogier as to whether or not they should participate or not. But Alar...
Does she say that?
She says, we still hear what happens in the world outside. False dragons, the great hunt for the horn. We hear and it passes us by. I do not think Tarmangaiden will pass us by or leave us in peace. Fare you well, Varen Sedai. All of you, farewell.
And may you shelter in the palm of the Creator's hand.
I think she would fall on the side of joining in the last battle, as opposed to some of the Ogier who fall on the side of withdrawing from the world.
Yeah.
And that's sort of an active debate that's going on. And sort of with that statement, she's pledging her support.
Varen manages to turn Ingtar around a bit. He's saying, are you even sure that the horn is on Toman Head? Do we even know that? And then he says, I still think I can make Barthanas. And Varen cuts him off. If we cannot be sure, Varen said mildly, cutting him off, then Toman Head is as good a place to look as any other. More than once I've heard you say you would ride to Shale Ghul if need be to recover the horn. Do you hold back now, at this? Ingtar's back stiffened. I hold back at nothing. Take us to Toman Head or take us to Shale Ghul. If the Horn of Valir lies at the end, I will follow you. That is well, Ingtar. Now, Rand.
That takes me back to possibly Varen doing a little bit of compulsion on Ingtar. Maybe she's stiffening his back, but maybe she's like...
I thought she was just manipulating him, old-fashioned style. Now, Rand, you have been transported by a portal stone more recently than I. Come. I love it. More recently as ever.
Yeah, I've never been transported. You were transported a few days ago. That's more recently.
She motioned to him, and he led Red over to her at the stone. You've used a portal stone? Then you don't mean for me to. He gave a relieved shrug. Varen looked at him blandly. I have never used a stone. That is why your use is more recent than mine. I am well aware of my limits. I would be destroyed before I came close to channeling enough power to work a portal stone. But I know a little of them, enough to help you, a bit.
I just love an Aes Sedai having to admit that they were just fucking with words.
Yeah.
It's so rare that usually when they get called out on it, they just give a blank look and stalk off or walk away. And here Varen's like, of course not. I was clearly lying, okay?
But I don't know anything, Rand says. He led his horse around the stone, looking it up and down. The one thing I remember is a symbol for our world. Celine showed me, but I don't see it here. Of course, Varen says basically. It wouldn't be on a stone in our world. The symbol are aids in getting to a world. She shook her head. What would I not give to talk to this girl of yours, or better, put my hands on her book? It is generally thought that no copy of Mirrors of the Wheel survived the breaking hole. And probably none did.
Yeah, I don't think any did. That's just because she read it before the breaking.
Celine is Lanfear. The next thing she says is, Seraphel always tells me there are more books that we believe lost than I could credit waiting to be found.
Oh, apparently she lied about her age to get into the White Tower. She was much older. She's 29 as a novice. She helped heal Matt and was an Elida supporter. No, nothing real significant. Just
she's a Brown.
Yeah. Sort of pops up a few times. We get some backstory, but She doesn't have a huge effect on any events that I can see.
Well, no use in worrying over things that I don't know. I do know some things. Varen goes on. The symbols on the top half of the stone stand for worlds. Not all the worlds that might be, of course. Apparently, not every stone connects to every world, and the Aes Sedai of the Age of Legends believed that there were possible worlds no stones at all touched. Do you see nothing that sparks a memory? Rand says, I don't remember anything. Nothing. Varen sighed. The symbols at the bottom indicate stones at other places. If you know the trick of it, you could take us, not to the same stone in another world, but to one of those others, there. She goes on to explain.
And I think that actually she kind of messes things up a little bit, because she crosses the ideas in his head.
Maybe, yeah. The next thing she says, she shows is that the symbol that indicates Toman Head.
And that's an important symbol. It's two parallel wavy lines crossed by an odd squiggle. When things start to go bad, well, we'll get there, but I want to talk, keep that in mind, that is the symbol for Toman Head in this world.
Sure. Does she show some other symbol that you think he gets confused with?
Well, that's not where he doesn't try and use that symbol. He tries to use a symbol to go to another world.
Do you play at dice or cards, Randalthor? Matt's the gambler. Why? Yes, well, we'll leave him out of this, I think. They probably shouldn't have. These other symbols are also known to me.
Is he lucky at this point?
I would say so. I always maintained, with no evidence, that, or very little evidence, that part of Matt's Ta'veren nature is the luck. And something may have happened to it. I also believe that he's enhanced by the penny shining theory that we've talked about a couple of times. So when the taint is removed from him, I think that it may have drew his talents out.
Sure. She then points out these 8 other symbols, right? There's the circle with the arrow, and there's up, down, left, right.
She basically shows him all the symbols that she knows and all the information she has.
And those symbols were worlds that were studied to make the ways. Varen points out the wavy lines with the squiggle through them and says that's the symbol to get to Toman Head.
Mm-hmm.
And if we knew the trick of it, you could just transport us right there. But we don't know that trick, so we're not going to try and do that. Instead, I'm going to point out to you these 8 other symbols, which take us to worlds that I know were studied in order to create the ways.
Okay.
So they should have some time distance stretching effect. So if you pick the right one of these symbols, it'll transport us to another world, hopefully one where time and distance work different, and we can walk to Toman Head just the way you did in the portal world. However, that's not what happens.
I'm nodding along.
And so he invokes the portal to go to this other world, but he can't hold that symbol in his head. And what happens is the symbol starts vacillating between the arrow and circle and the parallel wavy lines. And he's like fighting to go back and forth. And that's what causes the flickering between.
Gotcha. And the time. Next thing I have is there are supposed to be worlds where the very air would kill us at a breath, and worlds that barely have enough reality to hold together. I would not speculate on what might happen if we found ourselves in one of those. You must choose. As my father would have said, it's time to roll the dice.
I noticed that saying. It's a very Matt-like saying for Varen to come up with.
She talks about gambling, but this is, it's a really appropriate time to talk about gambling. But yeah, that's the first time we hear the sentence in the whole series.
Right, because I don't think Matt says it yet.
And Matt says it's time to toss the dice, but same
basic stuff. I wonder if that's just like a saying, because Matt gets it from, it's an old tongue saying, so I wonder if it's passed down. Varen's old enough, and her father was probably a little bit older, so, it could be just an old saying.
Rand's worried, and it says, well, what good would it do if I just, pick a random one and bring us to a place where we can't breathe and we all just die? What good will that do, Matt or the Horn?
So they're hoping for a world where they can move faster through distance and time.
Right.
So they can walk to Toman Head quicker.
Right.
And hoping not to get dumped into a world where there's no air.
Varen responds, you are the Dragon Reborn, she said quietly. Oh, you can die, but I don't think the pattern will let you die until it is done with you. Then again, the shadow lies on the pattern now, and who can say how that affects the weaving? All you can do is follow your destiny. I am Randall Thor, he growled. I am not the dragon reborn. I won't be a false dragon. You are what you are. Will you choose, or will you stand here until your friend dies?
It's basically Varen saying, listen, you've got some plot armor. Let's just go ahead and do this thing, because the pattern needs you. Like, you're not gonna die.
Plot armor.
Yeah, that's basically what she's saying, is you have plot armor. You're Ta'Veren. The symbols could have all been exactly alike for all they meant to him. The script could have well been a chicken scratching. At last he settled on one, with an arrow pointing to the left, because it pointed towards Toman Head, and an arrow that pierced the circle, because it had broken free.
As he wanted to.
I wonder if that symbol in particular is like...
Fast forward.
Not even fast forward, but like, if the circle is your life and the arrow is breaking out, like, here's what happens if you take a step to the left and your life changes. And I'm wondering if by touching that other symbol, he's somehow like triggering visions of all these other worlds. So my question is, what do you think causes this issue with the flickering? Do you think it's the fact that he messes up? Do you think it's the symbol that he chooses?
So the symbols are oscillating, so...
Do you think it's the fact that he does it wrong?
Yeah. Well, we don't know what the symbols mean, right? Nobody does. So we're not sure what he's doing, but he's like walking up to a really powerful time travel machine and just mashing buttons is what happens. So he has two symbols in mind. Yeah, I couldn't say, because we don't know how portal stones work, so I don't know what's happening.
I'm wondering if somehow, instead of moving them past a bunch of worlds, he moved them through a bunch of worlds.
It could be. I don't know what would cause you to see spans of your own life through worlds. But yeah. We know that Rand doesn't know what he's doing, and he picks these random symbols and goes, and this is what happens. He took the void. It was so easy now. The flame consumed fear and passion and was gone almost before he thought to form it. Gone, leaving only emptiness and shining Sidene. And it filled him, made him alive. He did not move a muscle, but he felt as if he were quivering with the rush of the one power into him. The symbol formed itself, an arrow piercing a circle, floating just beyond the void. As hard as the stuff it was carved on, he let the one power flow through him to the symbol. The symbol shimmered, flickered. Something is happening, Varen said. Something, the world flickered.
And we have the beginning of the first alternate life he lives.
This also shows that, because we know over the next couple of pages that what Varen says over the next few seconds is something
is happening. Something is not right. Something is wrong.
Varen screamed at the end. But yeah, so that's over the next, few seconds, however long it takes to that, they see all of this. An iron lock spun across the farmhouse floor, and Rand dropped the hot tea kettle as a huge figure with ram's horns on its head loomed in the doorway with the darkness of winter night behind it. "Run!" Tam shouted. And this is, of course, that scene in The Eye of the World, when a Trolloc kicks in the door, it explodes. Rand doesn't drop the kettle. He's scared shitless, and he hurls the kettle at the Trolloc that falls back, and Tam kills the next one. In this one, Rand drops the kettle because he's startled, and Tam kills the first one, but it looks like it falls on him, and he gets tangled up with it, and they both die.
But you're totally right. That's a good catch, that the reason that the Trolloc gets him this time is because he drops that kettle.
The tea kettle.
Yeah.
The next one is Rand never leaves Two Rivers. He marries Egwene. Egwene becomes wisdom. And through her her and Nynaeve's great talents, they managed to keep him alive for a fairly long life. He's gray at the end of it.
I thought it was just Egwene. I thought Nynaeve had left.
Oh, I don't know.
Egwene became wisdom, and most thought she was even better than the old wisdom Nynaeve Almira had been.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering
what happened to her.
Because we assume she would live a long time.
Yeah. We've talked about this before, but we suspect that channelers who don't know that they're channelers, they still have slowing, but not as much. So they probably live into their, like, well into their hundreds or something. Something that would observably be long, but also not out of the question, you know?
Right.
Like if Nynaeve lives to 140, she would just be the oldest woman anyone could remember, but...
So I assume she went to maybe a different village?
It's possible.
Yeah.
Or dies for some reason.
I also noticed that the Shanshan come back and pretty much take over Ranlan. They don't get to the two rivers.
They never go there.
They never bother going there, but they take over pretty much everywhere else and destroy the White Tower and Tarvalin, which makes Ranlan vulnerable to the Dark One invading.
Yeah.
False dragons are everywhere because the pattern demands a dragon. That's pretty consistent. What I wanted to say about the Shanshan is their coming varies like by a couple of years in each of these visions.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if perhaps it wasn't that they were always going to come at the same time. It was that Ishmael called them back when he wanted them to come back. And so I'm thinking that he didn't get the Shanshan to return to Ranlan until after he found Rand. And then he was like, ooh, I'll start bringing the Shanshan back.
It could be.
It's sort of a weak theory that, like, but the idea that, like, the Shanshan, even though they were spending all their time conquering the other continent, basically he triggered them to come back based on when he wants them to show up. It seems plausible to me.
I'm shrugging and nodding.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah. So I just think he was controlling the timing of exactly when. And that's why we see it change in the various visions, because in the real world, as soon as he sees Rand, he calls them back. But because Rand doesn't come out of the two rivers in some of these visions right away.
Yeah, sometimes he never leaves.
Yeah, so then it takes him a while to call the Shanshan back. And so it takes maybe 5-10 more years before they return.
In this next one, the Shanshan, attack Andor. And Rand takes his father's sword in this life and becomes one of the Queen's guards.
And here's where he gets taught how to fight by Tam. And one of the good sources of evidence that Tam is, in fact, a sword master, because he's able to teach Rand how to be
I noticed that.
Pretty much a badass.
I don't think it outright says that, but it says his skill with the sword earned him a place in the Queen's Guards. It doesn't outright say Tam taught him how to...
And so before the next vision, I wanted to talk about this quote in particular. The arrow and circle contorted into parallel wavy lines, and he fought it back again. So that's what I think is going on, where the parallel wavy lines represent Tommen's head.
Yeah.
And he's sort of fighting between alternate world, which is the circle with the arrow going through it, and Tommen head in our world.
The power raged. Flicker.
And so, and then this third vision, Egwene dies young. And so then Rand has no reason to stay in the Two Rivers, so he leaves. And that's why Tam teaches him how to use the sword.
Oh, yeah. He taught Rand how to use it. On the day Rand left, Tam gave him a letter that might get Rand taken into the army of Ilion.
Which we know because Tam was a veteran.
Yeah.
One of the guard.
His skill with the sword earned him a place in the Queen's Guards. And when Arthur Hawkwing's armies returned, Rand led 1,000 men when the Queen's Guards crossed the Mountains of Mist. And then again at the top of the next paragraph. The power came to him during the battle for Caemlyn, and he hurled lightning and fire among the invaders and split the earth under their feet. I always liked this one the best. At last, a lightning bolt hurled Rand from the palace wall, broken and bleeding. And he heard a voice whisper, "I have won again, Lews Therin."
I wanted to ask about that. Do you think that's just the Dark One whispering in his head?
Who else would it be? Ishmael?
Possibly. It's just an interesting...
Why
is that consistent across all the different realities?
Why does the Dark One call him Lews Therin? Right? Why would the Dark One address him as one iteration of a life that the Dark One sees over and over?
In the current time, he is the Dragon Reborn. Lews Therin is the dragon,
Okay.
And so we see a lot of these characters. And because there's that bleed over between the two, that's what makes Rand special, is he's not just like a lot of characters, are other people reborn. What makes him special is he actually has the memories of the previous dragon. So he is the dragon reborn.
Okay.
So he actually, is more his previous incarnation than any other person. And I think that's why
You think that's why the Dark One calls him Lews Therin?
yeah. And that's why a lot of the other characters, we see a lot of the Forsaken and a lot of the, the folks in
Well, for the
Teleron
humans,
Riyadh.
the heroes? Which folks in Teleran Riyadh?
The Heroes of the Horn.
Yeah, there's dragons in other ages. It makes sense that the humans would call him Lews Therin because they know him as Lews Therin they knew him as Lews Therin.
Sure. But why is the Dark One calling him Lews Therin?
Right. Why would the Dark One care to make the differentiation?
And also, it's not in all caps, which we generally see when the Dark One talks.
I like the idea that this is Ishmael.
I like the idea that it's Ishmael too.
And people in Discord are talking about how that's where this theory comes from. That's sometimes it is Ishmael when we think it's the Dark One, and sometimes it's the Dark One when we think it's Ishmael.
And I mean, we know Ishmael gets in his head pretty early on in the dreams. Maybe he's following his life in each of these realities.
Yeah. And I mean, does the Dark One see it as an eternal struggle in the way that... Because we know that Ishmael sees it that way.
Right. But for the Dark One, we think it's more of a single confrontation.
I have won again, Lews Therin. I like the idea that this could very well be Ishmael, and a lot of this stuff could be Ishmael, as opposed to...
and we've seen the all caps voice in Eye of the World, so of course we speculated that wasn't the Dark One either.
Well, after the Queensguard's life, I feel like I should read. Rand struggled to hold the void as it quivered under the hammer blows of the world flickering, to hold the one symbol as 1,000 of them darted along the surface of the void. He struggled to hold on to any one symbol, and this is where we find out that this is where Varen's screaming.
Mm-hmm.
The power was everything. Flicker, 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 flicker. He was a soldier. He was a shepherd. He was a beggar and a king. He was a farmer, gleeman, sailor, carpenter. He was born, lived, and died Aiel. He died mad. He died rotting. He died of sickness, accident, age. He was executed, and multitudes cheered his death. He proclaimed himself the Dragon Reborn and flung his banner across the sky. He ran from the power and hid. He lived and died, never knowing. He held off the madness and the sickness for years. He succumbed between two winters. Sometimes Moraine came and took him away from the two rivers, alone, or with those of his friends who had survived winter night. Sometimes she did not. Sometimes other Aes Sedai came for him. Sometimes the Red Ajah. Egwene married him. Egwene, stern-faced in the stole of the Emerald seat, led the Aes Sedai who gentled him. Egwene, with tears in her eyes, plunged a dagger into his heart, and he thanked her as he died. He loved other women, married other women. Elaine and Min and a fair-haired farmer's daughter met on the road to Camelin. And women he had never seen before. He lived those lives, 100 lives, more, so many he could not count them. And at the end of every life, as he lay dying, as he drew his final breath, a voice whispered in his ear, "I have won again, Lews Therin."
When I say this is a masterful chapter, I almost think it comes down to that paragraph. There's so much in that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's awesome.
So awesome. I kind of want to read it to you guys again, but I'm not going to do that.
I say we go through it a little bit. I mean, we see him as a soldier and a shepherd, a beggar and a king, which...
Those all make sense.
Yeah.
I really liked born, lived, and died in Aiel.
Yeah.
I mean, all that would have had to happen is that his mother made it back to the waste.
Or an Aiel
or never left.
Or an Aiel picks up the baby.
Yeah.
And brings it back. Or yeah, she never leaves.
Tam dies in the war.
Yeah. A lot of stuff like him proclaiming himself the dragon and then getting killed. A lot of uncertainty as to what's going on with that. I noticed there's no certainty in how long he can hold off the madness.
Yeah.
It could be as little as 2 years.
And sometimes he just never finds anything out. Like one of the fully fleshed out stories, or pretty well fleshed out stories, is, is Egwene as wisdom keeping him from dying all his life. And then she dies first.
I especially want to talk about this Egwene with tears in her eyes plunged a dagger into his heart, and he thanked her as he died, because she has a very similar vision in her accepted test. He begs her to kill him, and she has to leave. The way back will come but once, and she has to leave without killing him.
I think she chooses not to do it in her vision.
Okay.
But the fact that it presents itself in a similar manner says something about the nature of the accepted ter'angreal, in that these are real iterations of things that could have happened. These are real worlds. It's a real place.
Mm-hmm. I see it as something of high likelihood that, because it's, we're seeing it in a couple of other alternate world visions. So, there's a good chance that they could have gone down that path.
Along these lines of along all the different, I keep calling them iterations, but along all these different parallel universes, the ones that are most likely are more real. We know that. So,
yes.
For instance, the world that Rand and Hurin went to, where Arthur Hawkwing lost against an army of Trollocs, having been very unlikely, nothing lives there. It's not really a real it's not really a fully formed world.
I'm nodding.
Whereas this world where Rand goes mad from the power and begs Egwene to kill him is pretty likely. That could totally have happened.
Well, and all of these alternate realities are much more likely because they have people in them.
Yeah, exactly.
So these are all much, much more likely than the portal world that Rand ended up in with Lanfear.
Where there's nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Loyal that we learned that from. Is it Loyal?
I think that was Lanfear.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, Loyal tells us that Lanfear said that to him.
Okay.
And at the end of every life, as he lay dying, as he drew his final breath, a voice whispered in his ear.
I still think that, on the day I die, I'm going to be listening for that.
I win again, lose.
It'll be one of the last things I think about as I'm dying.
Be shit. Moraine never came. Now that I just said that out loud, correct me if I'm wrong, but in all the times that Moraine doesn't come, he doesn't leave the two rivers. Oh, no.
No, that's not true.
He does sometimes.
Yeah. He leaves the two rivers and he gets robbed and he has no future.
Yeah.
It doesn't go well without Moraine there.
He's at a severe disadvantage without Moraine's guidance. The void vanished, contact with Sidene fled, and Rand fell with a thud that would have knocked the breath out of him if he had not already been half numb. He felt rough stone under his cheek and his hands. It was cold. He was aware of Varen, struggling from her back to hands and knees. He heard someone vomit roughly, and raised his head. Uno was kneeling on the ground, scrubbing the back of his hand across his mouth. Everyone was down, and the horses stood stiff-legged and quivering, eyes wild and rolling. Ingtar had his sword out, gripping the hilt so hard that the blade shook, staring at nothing. Loyal sat sprawled, wide-eyed and stunned. Matt was huddled in a ball with his arms wrapped around his head, and Perrin had his fingers dug into his face as if he wanted to rip away whatever he had seen, or perhaps rip out the eyes that had seen it. None of the soldiers were any better. Massima wept openly, tears streaming down his face, and Hurin was looking around as if for a place to run.
I kind of wanted to talk about how we think each of those characters is affected and how that goes on to change how they behave in the future.
I think it strongly affects everyone here.
I do too.
Varen regrettably once again gives us no clues as to what happened.
She has one clue. Does it surprise you that your life might go differently if you made different choices or different things happened to you? Though I never thought well, the important thing is we are here. So we do have that one sentence where she's like, I never thought so something.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I wonder if that's where she gets the idea to poison herself and die and use the last hour of her death to betray the dark.
Nice.
Because I think what she's saying is, I never thought I would poison myself. I never thought I would commit suicide to get what I want.
Maybe she finds a way around the rules, the last hour of her death thing, because of she sees something that she did.
Mm-hmm. That's possible too.
I never thought I would betray the world or something, you know.
Well, but I think it mirrors her because she only joined the Black Ajah to stay alive.
Yeah.
And so I never thought I would commit suicide is basically like I never thought I would die for this thing. I betrayed the light to stay alive. I never thought I would come back to the light by killing myself. So that's why I think that statement is so powerful for her. And so I really do think that the whole undermining of the Black Ajah comes back to this point here.
I would like to think so.
I mean, she's already definitely been making her book forever, but I think her ability to turn it over and her decision to turn it over, at least the germ of the idea comes from here. We've talked a lot about how we think this affects Ingtar.
Yeah, this is definitely the moment where...
The Shinaran gave a start when she touched his arm, and he looked at her with frantic eyes. "I walk in the light," he said hoarsely. "I will find the Horn of Valir and pull down Shael Ghul's power. I will." "Of course you will," she said soothingly. She took his face in her hands, and he drew a sudden breath, abruptly recovering from whatever had held him, except that memory still lay in his eyes. That's the first time he says, "I walk in the light."
Guys,
honestly.
What did she heal him from? She doesn't heal anyone else. He's not injured.
Oh, she heals other folks too.
She does?
She started around among the others, stopping briefly by each. Rand went to his friends. When he tried to straighten Matt jerked, blah, blah, blah.
Damn it. That ruins my theory.
Well, everyone was on their feet again except for Rand and his two friends. She came and put her hands on Matt as she spoke. When Matt blinked and stood up, he still looked ill, but he moved spryly. She put her hands on Perrin. Rand backed away when she reached for him. So she heals all of them, except Rand.
Wait, does Matt refuse it? He says, "I don't want any Aes Sedai help."
That's Rand.
Oh.
Matt's been healed regularly by Varen. She heals him constantly.
Yeah.
But I always thought it was just pretty much...
Oh, yeah, I misread that. Because the line starts when Matt blinked and stood up, and then, yeah.
It's not obvious.
Yeah.
I had to read it a few times. But I think that she's more just like, they're all in shock. I think she's just healing them from shock.
Yeah. Well,
sorry to ruin your theory on Ingtar.
No, that's fine. It was... I'd rather be right than have a good theory or have a fun theory. We know Matt pretty much outright says he saw a life where he betrayed Rand. He must have told the wrong people who Rand was or what he was.
I think he was just... I can imagine Matt freaking out and be like, "Oh my God, my friend's the freaking Dragon Reborn. He's going to kill us all." And like just saying that in a tavern and that getting Rand killed.
So after this, he's kind of on his guard about it. And he pledges to Rand. He was like, "I'll never sell you out, man. Mm-hmm. That will never happen."
And I think that's one of the reasons why Matt is so loyal to Rand over the next series, even though he doesn't necessarily want to be, is that he... Now, one of the things that's problems with Matt is he may not really remember this very much after he is healed from the dagger. It's sort of all fuzzy. And I doubt that, he has a whole lot of memories from this time.
And then from Perrin, we hear him say, I really liked this. I'll read it really quick. "We don't have many choices, really, do we, Rand? Whatever happens, whatever we do, some things are almost always the same." He let out another long breath. "Where are we? Is this one of the worlds you and Hurin were talking about?" "It's Tome Head." Well, and it's our world in autumn.
Yeah.
But Perrin's pretty obviously talking about being a wolf brother and how he can't escape that. Like it's part of his soul.
I'm nodding. That no matter what he does, he seems to always become...
But it also applies to Rand.
It does. It very much does.
Not that Perrin knows that, but we know that what Perrin saw were, all these different... through all these different lives, it had one line running through it. Who's next? Massima?
Yeah.
Why is Massima crying? He's the only one. What did he see?
I don't know, but I think it affected his decision to become the prophet.
It's certainly important later, and it's not too long before he becomes the prophet here.
I mean, we know that later he runs in, when Rand does the whole fight in the sky at the end of the book,
Yeah.
That's when he goes from hating Rand to worshiping him.
When it's proved that he's the Dragon Reborn.
Right. But I have to wonder if maybe this vision didn't possibly drive him a little insane.
Could be. Yeah, I wonder what he saw, but, any number of terrible things.
Yeah. It doesn't seem to warn him off being the prophet at all.
No, maybe it drives him towards it.
That's what I think. Yeah, I get the idea that maybe he's a very close-minded person. I like that theory, that because he's so close-minded, all these possible different visions of the world, really, he's unable to handle them. He breaks down. In the same way that in the Redstone Terangrial, the Aiel chief claws out his own eyes because he can't adapt to the truth and the knowledge that's around him. I imagine Masema can't adapt to these alternate lives, and in a way, it breaks his mind.
I like that. Because he is totally batshit later.
And so that's why he gets all this, prophecy. He, clings to religion because he just can't make sense of the world. And so he, starts to worship Rand. And it's how he copes with the visions that happened here. I'm not really sure how it affects Huron, mostly because we don't really see Huron much after this. He looks around for a place to run. He just seems scared. I don't know if there's I didn't see any lines from him about what happened to him or
there's nothing
how
to
he feels
speculate.
about it.
He doesn't have any dialogue.
It seems like most of the soldiers are just solid people that they get through it. They don't really know what happened, but they're like, well, that was weird. And is it possible that Varen going around and healing them, maybe she took away some of the impact of those memories from everybody?
The impact?
Well, it might explain why we only really get it from Rand's point of view, that maybe she's sort of, maybe not the impact, but the vivid memories that they all have, that maybe she's sort of soothing them away a little bit so they can recover. Or not necessarily on purpose, but the healing maybe process might make them forget a little bit.
I don't think healing would do anything to take your memory away.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. It's a lot like the Aiel test for becoming an apprentice, where your mind can't handle remembering all of it, so it fades.
Yeah. Yeah, these Terangrial, where people see alternate lives, I think, are related to these worlds in one way or another. Even the Aiel Terangrial, you're seeing the past through the perspective of your ancestor, yes, but you're seeing the past.
And it's also somehow connected through Teleron Riyadh.
And the future. Or possible futures.
Possible futures, yeah.
And Varen says we have to head west to get anywhere.
Yeah, because they're on Toman Head 4 months later, I think she says.
Approximately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's in autumn. And it's an interesting time jump, because then we go back to the girls to see what they were doing basically during those
I never
4
really
months.
caught that before, but that whole time ran for 4 months when Rand was standing still, essentially, or in nothingness somewhere. Egwene is learning how to use the power.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of Forsaken are scheming, establishing their power bases, taking over countries. He loses a lot in those 4 months. A lot of time.
Yeah, it's easy to forget that because, from Rand's perspective, this lasted 30 seconds or whatever,
Yeah, well,
even less than that.
Many lifetimes or a few seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in Randland, a season just passed.
Mm-hmm. And I think Egwene talks about the fact that she can't feel him in the world anymore, and he's missing. And I think, honestly, the reason she's able to stay in the White Tower and study for 3 months while he's not in the world, the second he comes back into the world, she gets yanked by a Taviran out of the White Tower.
That's a great catch, because he's not in the world, so he can't
yank people around.
Taviran nature can't change the way the threads are woven.
Which also is why the Forsaken are able to establish a power base, because he's not around to mess things up for them.
Aradia is saying she needed that time to level up too, so in a way he had to get stuck so she could grow, which I wonder if that's
definitely
that's a huge part of it too.
Yeah.
Because now she has to go to the Shan-Chan and forcibly learn how to destroy things, and that she has a talent for earth channeling.
She goes through her multiple different, she trains in the White Tower, and then she trains with the Shan-Chan. And by training, I mean
Yeah, it's
enslaved
training.
to. And then she trains with the Aiel.
Right.
And at some point she learns from the Sea Folk and from Moghedian because of what Nynaeve and Elaine are able to accomplish. So she's able to get knowledge from 5 different societies and bring it together.
Mm-hmm.
But it begins during these 4 months that Rand wastes time. That's also why The Great Hunt, I think, is one of the longest in terms of timeline books, because we get this 4-month sort of training montage as well as some time in the beginning when he's just sitting around in Faldara doing a bit of training.
Yeah.
So this whole book takes place over
5 months.
Which is a huge chunk of the 2-year period of time that we get. But it also explains like how the characters get a chance to change and evolve and grow. And, there's a bit of a jump between now and the Dragon Reborn, but that's okay because they have this time to grow and level up.
Yeah, I'll read the last couple of lines. They mounted immediately and rode west, leaving the portal stone behind. No one protested, Rand least of all. Light, let me not be too late.
When they're on Toman Head and they ride off the portal stone, Egwene is imprisoned by the Shan-Chan at this moment.
Oh yeah, because when the battle happens, she's there.
Yep, and that's only a few days after this.
Yeah, he is just in time.
Yep. Anyway, just fun little timeline stuff.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?